Thank you so much to everyone who signed up as a Patreon supporter over the summer. We really, really appreciate it. We've got a few hundred Patreon supporters now, which is amazing. We're so, so grateful for every penny. And if you can donate to support the podcast, you can find us on Patreon. You can make a regular gift and you can help to keep Over Undergoing. There are also 3 different ways you can support us. So we have the Wokerati package, which is £3 a month plus VAT. The Prosecco Socialist package, which is £10 a month plus VAT, and the Ultimate Comrade package, which is £50 a month plus VAT.
All packages include over the top, under the radar weekly bonus episode, access to WhatsApp private community, and the weekly newsletter. Hi, I'm Gary Young.
And I'm Carys Sultana. And this is Over the Top, Under the Radar.
This week's show is from the London Podcast Festival, where we're in conversation with independent MP for Coventry South, Zarah Sultana.
We hope you enjoy it.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Introducing our hosts with the mostest, Gary Young and Carys Sultana.
Welcome to Over the Top and Under the Radar Live. I'm Carys Sultana.
And I'm Gary Young.
Okay, enough from us. I think we're going to welcome onto the stage.
Big welcome.
A big name, a big welcome. Elected as a Labour MP.
Yes.
Zarah Sultana. Let's give her a big round of applause.
Yay!
Oh. So tell us a bit about how you got into politics.
So I joined the Labour Party when I was 17 years old. I looked at the Tories and the Lib Dems in coalition and thought that they were causing so much harm to our communities through austerity. But as a young person, the tripling of tuition fees is what got me really rolled up. I went to university in 2012, so I was part of the first cohort that experienced the tripling of tuition fees. And for me, that was a direct attack on young people. I saw politicians who had gone to university for free, who got grants, taking away these opportunities from young people. And it was the first time I really fully immersed myself into kind of parliamentary processes. When you see, a bill being debated in the Commons, then it goes to the Lords and the ping pong. So I was completely immersed because I knew I was going to be impacted. And prior to that, being from inner city Birmingham, I'm from an area called Lozells. And often when I tell people from Birmingham which area I'm from, they have a reaction to that. And it's because people always see people from a particular postcode in a particular way. And I often share a story of when I was at school. I went to a comprehensive and there was a senior police officer who never visited my school in West Midlands Police, and he went to Birmingham City Council and he said, I could go to that school and every kid there will be able to tell me which gangs they're going to end up in when they're older. So we've got teachers who are helping us get extra GCSEs in year 9. We're trying really hard to get the best grades because that's the recipe, right? You work hard, you get good grades, you go to university, and then there's like a job at the end of it. It's your dream job, and then you'll be able to buy a house. And that was a lie, and it's still a lie, that this kind of formula that you're told will work is bullshit. And that really politicized me. So where I was from, I was seeing youth centres closed down. Prior to going to university, during my Freshers' Week, me and my dad went on a delegation. We went to the West Bank and Jerusalem. It was for Labour Party members and councillors and activists, so you just had to be a Labour Party member. And we went during, my Freshers' Week, and for me that was a life-changing experience because I'd never seen myself as someone who was privileged. I'd experienced racism. I knew that being from, an inner city area made people see in a particular way. And then I go to the occupied Palestinian West Bank and to Jerusalem as well. And I'm able to go through checkpoints because I've got a British passport. And people are really nice to me, but they're humiliating Palestinians who are trying to go through these checkpoints, and they've created all of these obstacles to their movement. I went to a military court and I saw young boys the age of 10 being trialed. I went to Hebron and I saw people whose houses had been occupied by settlers who were facing the daily violence of the IDF. When I came back, I was I couldn't really understand how that was allowed to continue. So the first thing I did was I joined my Palestine Society at university, and I got involved in campaigns with the Black and Ethnic Minority Association. So while I studied international relations and economics, I thought the course was interesting, it was fun, it was very Eurocentric, I think they did a one lecture on Africa. And I was just like, it
sounds about
great.
right.
It's a wonderful country.
Yeah, exactly. But it was through everything else that I was doing that I was becoming more politically engaged and politically active. And I was a Labour member at this time, but the Labour Society was just having, MPs come in and having a chat. I get invited and I do those things too, but that wasn't what was really interesting me. I was trying to understand why the world was the way it was, and I was getting that education elsewhere.
So I'm intrigued. You see those things, you're engaged, and you decide to join the Labour Party at that age, because you could join no party and just be involved in a single issue or a few issues, or there's the Greens. Why did you join Labour?
So my family were always Labour supporters. My parents were passive Labour members. It was a thing that I felt like was the right thing to do, because I was looking at what was happening and I wanted to get involved, and locally there was no other political organisation or other space to be politically active, and it was only when I went to university I saw that. But being a teenager, there was nothing locally to kind of absorb you or for you to get involved in. And now I see young people and they get involved in the climate movement. They'll find spaces locally, around food banks, and obviously those have scourged now and we've become a nation of food banks, and people have found different spaces to get more involved in. But locally I found that there was nothing. I had to take a really weird route of getting more involved through, university and the National Union of Students. And then I actually wasn't actually an active Labour member. I was a card-carrying Labour member, but I felt like getting involved in the Labour Party locally was difficult. My CLP was in special measures, and it was only taken out of special measures when Jeremy became leader, and he reviewed all of those, because often it was racism and Islamophobia why certain CLPs were put into special measures. So I couldn't get involved, and actually older men locally didn't want young women to get involved. I literally had no other avenue, and it was through getting more involved through the Black Students campaign in the National Union of Students and organising around issues that were really quite hard-hitting. We would campaign with the United Friends and Families campaign around deaths in police custody. We actually were able to work with Black Lives Matter in the US and had this tour. We did a lot of work on the Prevent agenda, as well as mental health and looking at housing and all other things related to students and more wider.
I have a question for both of you, which is, because Carys is also a member of the Labour Party. I spend quite a lot of time taking a piss out of her for that.
He laughs. He normally laughs when he says that.
It's a fine thing to be. But
as long as you don't shove it in my face, it's okay. It's a lifestyle choice.
My question to both of you is, if you were the age you were when you joined the Labour Party now, would you join it?
If I were 21.
Is that the age when you joined it?
Yeah.
I come across a lot of young people now, and they find it hard when it comes to what they've seen as a lack of action on transphobia, when they look at the way Islamophobia and anti-Black racism hasn't been effectively tackled or treated as seriously, which is what Martin Ford said in the Ford report. I think it's a harder case to make to young people, to a 70-year-old Zarah now. I think you would have a much harder time trying to encourage her to join the Labour Party. But I think that there are still a lot of young people who do join the Labour Party and are joining the Labour Party because they see it as a vehicle for change. I would say that the Labour Party is a contested space, and the left has always been in the Labour Party. You've always had a parliamentary left to be able to achieve the changes that we want to achieve in society, whether that's to tackle poverty, whether that's to nationalise utility companies, whether that's to have a foreign policy that's actually rooted in peace and justice. You have to be in there and fighting for that. But it is a very hard argument to make.
I think I probably wouldn't join, and I think I struggle in this moment. I think 21-year-old me would be like, well, what's the point? Labour are in power, and it's a certain part of the Labour Party that are in power. So no, I don't think it's an easy sell. I guess I agree with Zarah that the Labour Party isn't just who the current leader is or what the current PLP is. And actually, my experience of joining the Labour Party and meeting Labour Party members was the thing that kept me in. I joined because Tony Blair was leaving as Labour leader, And I had been really engaged on Iraq, and I was like, ugh, he's gone. Maybe we get someone better. Little did I understand it was just going to be Gordon Brown. That had already been decided. But I got involved locally. I was back home. I graduated, back living with my mum, and all the local members were like people that were doing things locally that had similar politics to me, that also didn't think that invading Iraq was a good idea. And I was like, oh, if it's just an organisation of people like this, then like maybe it is a place for me. I want to hear a bit about the journey from joining the Labour Party, being involved in student politics, becoming an MP.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool and
A lot of
impressive.
stuff
But how
happened
did
in between.
you, yeah.
So after graduating, I was working in retail. So I often say that to develop resilience and a thick skin, you should work at Primark like I did for 2 years. And then after Primark, you should go to H&M and do that for 2 years. The staff discount at H&M is quite good, to be honest. Yeah, 25%. Okay. And then it's also at Cos and on the stories and
all
elsewhere.
Of them? Oh my God,
yeah.
Okay.
Just FYI, if anyone's considering a career change. Actually in retail, seeing firsthand low pay, understanding the importance of trade unions, which you're never taught about, and then actually trying to find a graduate job. I really struggled. I was going to the job centre. They were looking at my CV and saying, you've got all of this voluntary experience. You're working in retail. You know, you've got a degree. Why don't you just like take these tips, like go to your interview on time and make sure you check like Google Maps about your route. And I was like, okay, cool. You know, they were trying their best, but that happened. And then I found work in London. I worked in London for a bit, as many people do. I thought rent was absolutely insane. I was just like, this is crazy. I want to go back home. So I went back to the West Midlands, and I was really lucky because I found work with the Labour Party as a community organiser. So I was working in Wolverhampton, in Halesone, in Stourbridge, and in particular Brexit areas, because under Jeremy, the Labour Party obviously had a huge surge in membership and a huge surge in funding and wanted to invest in community organising as a political strategy, which has now been scrapped. But the whole point was you go into these areas and you talk to people and you listen and you develop campaigns. And often people don't think that what you're doing is political, because I was learning about bus routes that had been shut down that were connecting communities to hospitals. It was looking at living wage campaigns. It was all of these things that unite people. In Wolverhampton, there was a GP surgery that was facing closure, and it was about bringing people together and organising campaigns. And I loved that. That was amazing. But working for the Labour Party, understanding the structures more, gaining that institutional knowledge, working closer with my trade union, that was incredible. But a particular thing happened in 2019 before the general election, which was the European elections. I did this crazy thing by saying I want to run in those. A lot of people were like, we're leaving the EU. You are weird. Why are you doing this? And it was because I was really concerned about the anti-immigration rhetoric that was just going unchallenged. And I looked at the Nigel Farage poster that, you know, dominated headlines, and I was just like, how have we come to this place? And I wanted to do something about it. So I thought if I ran in that election and I at least kind of made an argument, you know, that challenged some of this rhetoric, that would be more helpful than doing nothing. I was placed 5th on the regional list. I didn't get elected. I didn't go to Brussels, but I'd never run an election before. It was a whirlwind 3-week experience. And yeah, I gained a lot from it. And then I was encouraged to run for the general in November of that year.
I mean, let's stay with that motivation for a moment. You were worried about the right-wing rhetoric. You were worried about Farage. Let's fast forward.
And now he's one of my colleagues.
Well, let's fast forward to this summer. How do you see and understand this summer? And do you think of it as a continuum from then?
I struggled with the arguments that people were making that this has just happened in a vacuum. How has this happened? Anyone who's looked at the headlines that have come out from the Daily Mail, the Telegraph, that have come from the Express, even articles that people have written in The Guardian, the kind of more liberal journalism, it was there for all of us to kind of bear witness to. And also in politics, when you look at the language that's come from Westminster, when you look at what think tanks have been allowed to produce and state as credible, you can see how this was in the making. I felt a real strong need to challenge some of that.
You went onto Good Morning Britain, like in the sort of at the height of the riots. And I don't know if people saw, it went viral. It was a really, I'll explain quickly for those who don't know. Zarah was on, it was Ed Balls, who then later interviewed his wife, who's the Home Secretary, and that's fine. It was like Ed Balls, I think maybe Kate Garraway, and it was just this horrible kind of pile-on. It felt like a little bit like bullying, but it was really unpleasant. And that horrible Tory Andrew Pearce or something was like grinning, and it was basically an all-white panel of people firing questions at you, not letting you answer and then just kind of taking anything you say and twisting it. And it was, for me, I felt really angry watching it. I can't imagine how it felt to sort of be in the chair. But also this sort of like smug, a continuation of what you're saying, like a sort of group of smug liberal people who want to condemn the rioters, and then had a politician on, a Muslim woman, and didn't really let her speak. Like, what was it like being in the chair?
I felt like I just had to get the show over and done with, and I was just dealing with it in the moment. And when I finished, I just wondered if everyone else had seen what I had experienced, because you kind of feel like maybe it was just me. And I did get quite upset after the show, and some staff members, some women took me into the side room, and I was just kind of processing what had happened. I got so many emails and so many messages from people who had said, other women of colour who have been in similar situations who could relate. And that's a horrible thing for other people to kind of also relate to. I wish it was something that was more positive. But in that moment, I just felt quite shocked that I was being asked why I thought the riots were Islamophobic when mosques were being targeted, when language was anti-Muslim, when women whose hijabs were being pulled off. And I was just kind of like, am I the one that is not understanding the question? Because that's just utterly bizarre. You would not ask that question for any other form of racism. And then trying to answer that question, and it's like, you've got to answer the question. It's like, I'm literally trying to answer the question, but I'm getting shouted down on. And it's really interesting because I feel like I've become quite numb to that experience based on what happens in Parliament. Since 2019, I feel like when I've tried to make a speech, I get heckled. People make a whole kind of barrage of noise, and I've just become quite used to that. So in some regards, it wasn't like an uncommon experience. It was just on a TV studio. Yeah.
It's kind of really horrible hearing you say that. And I think, definitely as a woman of colour, I really related on a visceral level, like felt that feeling of like, and if I lose my temper, I'm the angry black woman.
Exactly.
I'm the like bullying, aggressive woman of colour.
I was so conscious of that. I did not want to be the angry brown woman. So I just had to try to answer the questions, just bat them off. And also, for me, it was really important knowing that I was going to be on a panel with a former Labour MP, someone who works for the Daily Mail and also works for GB News, and someone who sits on the Henry Jackson Society's executive board, because for me, that was the best example of how we are where we are today. And for me, it was really important to show a mirror and say that what you're witnessing on the streets of the UK, you also play a part in that. Please don't look at it as like some kind of like sports commentary that you're able to offer, and reflect on how we got here and how your organisation or the work that you do or the words that you've written and published have got us to this point. And turns out people don't like to hear that.
Yeah, shock horror. The thing I want to ask you, and I don't want you to stop doing it, is like, what kind of motivates you, or how do you just as a human keep doing that stuff? Because you are really vocal and really public, and you could maybe just, do a TikTok, post it on your social media and be like, I'm not going to go on telly. What motivates you to do it? And how do you keep doing it when people treat you really appallingly and like it's not okay? And, you heard the reaction from like, no one thinks it's okay. It's just part of you not just want to be like...
a great deal of responsibility. I feel really lucky to be in this position. And I feel like loads of other people don't have that opportunity to voice their concerns, whether it's about the government policy on Gaza, whether it's about poverty, whether it's about trade union rights. And I feel really lucky to be able to do that. It's my job and I get paid really well for it. And I know that, this job can come and go. Like, that's the nature of politics. Things happen really fast. And I can't live with regret that I didn't speak up. And I know that I'm going to get abuse. And I know that my inbox is going to be full of threats and hate mail and so forth. But I have to do it because it's important to, and that's what my politics are. My politics are to speak truth to power, even if that's really hard. And even if there are personal consequences to that, that's life. So yeah, I take that responsibility really seriously. For me, politics is about life and death. And when governments make decisions, especially like, I guess, austerity, people die. Like, it is that serious for me.
You said it's really important to speak up, and you did speak up in July about two-child cap. And as a result, we struggled to know how to describe you.
Yes, that happens quite a bit. I've
Yeah.
been on TV shows where they're like, Labour, and then afterwards they're like, we've got to correct it. She's no longer in the Labour Party. And it's beautiful because it offers me an opportunity to explain why I'm no longer a Labour MP. Sorry, I am in the party. Oh, I am in the party. I'm just not in the PLP.
So are you an independent MP or a Labour MP?
I'm seen as an independent MP who's still a Labour Party member.
Right.
But that's too long to write, I guess, on TV. So,
Because, yeah, we had a debate. I was like, I think she's still technically a Labour MP. Or like, yeah, okay.
yeah, I still sit with the Labour Party. I'm still paying my subs.
So just, can you talk us through that rebellion? So there was that rebellion. We've got the winter fuel payments coming up. There's been stuff about weapons and Israel. I'm just wondering how you understood that rebellion and how you understand it in light of what is coming down the pike.
That worries me, what is coming down the path, because politics is about choices and it's about political will. A Labour government can make different decisions. It can scrap a two-child benefit cap that is keeping 300,000 children in avoidable poverty. It can choose not to means test winter fuel payments to pensioners who might otherwise freeze this winter to death. And you can do that by making different choices and different decisions. You can choose to tax the very rich. The top 1% of the population own more than 70% of the population in terms of wealth in this country. That's crazy. If you think about from 2010 to 2024, the richest people in this country have tripled their wealth. So the tough choices that are being made are going to be by people who have to choose between heating and eating. It's not by politicians in Westminster who can make different decisions. And that's what I decided back in July now. For me, it's if the Labour Party has a moral mission, it has to be to eradicate child poverty. We can scrap the two-child benefit cap today, and that would help so many families, and it would bring those difficult decisions that parents are having to make. They don't have to make them, and I think the Labour Party has to change course on that. It was characterised as the seven of us voting against the Labour Party and voting against the King's Speech, and that's just not true. We voted for the King's Speech. This was an amendment that I would argue would make the King's Speech even better. But going forward, I worry that the Labour Party is taking a route which has austerity policies. And as someone who, and many people in the room and many people who are listening to this, we know what austerity did to our country. And those economic arguments around austerity have been thoroughly refuted. So it really concerns me that we're back here in 2024. We lost the whip, and in politics, I guess you have to see why that was done and what message that people were seeking to send out by doing that.
And in terms of the vote itself, did you know before you voted that you would lose the whip?
I knew they weren't going to be happy. I'm not naive. I wasn't contacted by the whips. There's a lot of hearsay. A lot of things go to journalists first and you see them on Twitter before you find out. But half an hour after the vote, I got an email to say that the whip had been suspended for 6 months, subject to a review now in January. Until then, they just expect me to follow the whip and be on my best behaviour, I reckon.
So they've removed the whip, but you're still supposed to follow it? Because I was
Yes.
thinking, well, you can't get suspended twice, so you might as well go for it now until January.
But
That's
this
a
is the
very
thing.
Gary way of thinking of things.
You still get the text. You still are expected to follow the whip. Yeah. So the only thing is you're seen as someone who's on the naughty step and you're suspended. How that process goes is really up to the whip's office and the Labour leadership. That's ultimately where the decision has come from.
So you're in the sort of limbo until January,
Yes.
and you don't know what the process will be or how they'll decide.
Yeah. Nothing at all. No.
Do you want us to put in a word for you?
Yeah, please. Drop some people some nice messages.
I don't know if a word from us is going to help. Anyway.
No, not all right. No, I just like the idea. So we're at that time in the evening where we want to open it up.
Has anyone got... Oh, the lights are up.
Hi, my name's Brian. I've got a question for Zarah. That was a really awful interview, the Ed Balls one. I thought it was really bad for you to go through that. There's a Democratic congressman called Pete Buttigieg, I think it is, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, who regularly goes on Fox News. He gets quite a hostile take from Fox News, but he regularly goes on because he thinks it's important to challenge these things. And I was wondering, would you go on, say, GB News? Do you think it's important to challenge these views in media?
So I think it's important to have red lines, and I personally don't do GB News. I don't even know if GB News have reached out to me. I don't want them to reach out to me. I'm not saying that. But for me, it's really important to kind of have, those red lines. And I actually don't criticize people who do go and do that. What the example you gave, I think, of Pete Buttigieg, I don't know if I've pronounced his name right either, but I understand the need to do that and to engage with our audience. I don't think it's my job to do that. And I will pick who I speak to based on my own assessment of effectiveness. Who am I trying to speak to? What message am I trying to get out? Because I find that you could end up saying yes to everything. And I think very early on in the job, I found myself doing a lot. And then you kind of just get quite tired. And also you don't know why you're saying yes, but you feel the need to say yes. Sometimes it's not just saying no, it's just picking and choosing who you're speaking to. So I think there's a place for people on the left to engage with that media, but it's not my cup of tea, basically.
Hiya, I'm Christina. Thank you so much for the WhatsApp group as well. I'm a big fan. I was on the fizz and the cheese boards on election night. Fell asleep.
Are there any other WhatsApp
yeah, Monica's over there.
Yes. It's a fun space.
Honestly,
a fun space. If you're not a member of the WhatsApp group, please join.
Yeah,
Sorry,
the snack chat in particular, I'm a big fan. Jam kicked everything off this week. It's been a fun week. Yeah, we don't like strawberry. The question that I have for you is particularly to do with kind of local government and local politics, particularly kind of like the Metro mayors and the impact that they've had. Like big fan of Andy Burnham and Steve Rotherham, the way that they've almost kind of formed a bit of a coalition across the Northwest. Obviously, I'm not local, as I'm sure you've probably picked up, but I do live down here now, so it's an interesting one. I've kind of swapped the north for the south, but I'm interested to know what your thoughts are in terms of local government and how that can have an impact on national government and on national discourses.
When I was at The Guardian, I did a series on knife crime. I think the things that we found made the case for regional government in particular. The knife crime is basically kind of framed as a thing that black kids do to each other in London. And then that happens elsewhere every now and then. When in fact, most of the kids who die from knives are not black. And that every kind of area of Britain, it works slightly differently. So it is overwhelmingly one community in London. But in the Midlands, it's very different. And in Scotland, it's very different. And in the Northwest, it's very different. And Scotland, which I know is not local or regional, it's national, but there are some regions that have more people in Scotland. In Scotland, they came up with a Scottish solution to knife crime that has worked really, really well. And they could only do it because the polity was small enough and because it was tailored to the needs of people in Scotland. It's a small country, Britain, but there is regional and local variation. And the more democracy that we have at the point of contact, the better, I think. But I do think that argument is helped by having a concrete example, because otherwise it seems like another layer of bureaucracy, when in fact it's a layer of access.
I would just say that the UK is one of the most centralised governments in Europe. And that means that when we look at where decisions are being made, far too much happens in Westminster. And the more decentralisation and the more powers that are given to devolved mayors and devolved nations, that can only make things better. And I think there has to be a move towards that. And even, when I look at what's happening in Manchester in particular with the B network and how buses have been taken under, I guess, the franchise first and then a move towards public ownership, that has to be the direction we go in. And I know that the West Midlands is trying to follow Andy Burnham, and I know that that's happening in West Yorkshire as well. But that's what happens. We make people feel more empowered, more locally. And, when trust is already so low in politics, that has to be the way we move from a centralised system to a more kind of decentralised form of governance.
And I think I have definitely been proven wrong about the Metro mayors, because I remember being like, more elections, more politicians doesn't feel like the solution. But I think, in the context of how centralised British politics is, and it is like uniquely centralised, and our second chamber is lords and bishops, not elected, which in a lot of countries you might elect all of your politicians.
I think it's just us and Iran that have religious people,
clergy and hereditary peers.
I read that Lesotho is the other country that has the aspect of hereditary peers, just us and little Lesotho.
So it's us, Lesotho and Iran.
Yeah, we're flying the flag for,
winning team.
Yeah. So I think in that context, and also because Steve Rotherham and Andy Burnham and Sadiq Khan, because also the Metro Mayors have done brilliant jobs, and because we've got, again, this really odd system where we have devolved parliaments in Wales, and we have Stormont in Northern Ireland, and we have the Scottish Parliament, and then in England we have Westminster. And so I think it's also trying to address that weird democracy deficit where, I don't know, maybe my mum would be like, well, the English dominate the main parliament, and she is there. But where English people have don't have their own regional parliament. I think the Metro Mayors, especially because they're sort of working together on issues, they're a really good thing.
And with that, I want to say thank you to Zarah.
Thank you so much,
I want to say
Zarah.
thank you to you, the audience.
Yeah.
Thank you to my co-host.
Thanks to him as well. He's all right, isn't he? Thanks. Give yourselves a round of applause.
Yeah.
First ever live show.
Thanks for listening to Over the Top, Under the Radar. Remember to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Make sure you sign up to our newsletter at overunderpod.com.
If you want to support the show, find us by searching Over the Top, Under the Radar on Patreon and put your money where your ears are.
You can also find us all over social media at over_under_pod_. We're on Instagram, we're on TikTok, we're on YouTube, we're on X.